About to begin the services for Mrs. Joyce Piven. We want to welcome everyone here, the chapel, the many people that are here, as well as all of the folks that are viewing online. Just a gentle reminder for those of you that are present here at the chapel, if you have a cell phone with you, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. Officiating this afternoon was Rabbi Rachel Weiss from the Jewish Reconstructionist Congregation in Evanston.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a room that is filled with community. It is filled with legacy. It is filled with memory. It's filled with students and teachers and friends, some who have not seen each other or been in the same room for a very long time, some who have been gathering together every day and every moment, and all of whom are connected because everyone in this room loved Joyce Piven. And everyone in this room was affected, related, taught by, encouraged by, seen by this remarkable woman for her almost 95 years. Jewish tradition teaches us that when we first hear or learn of a death, that our hearts just crack wide open. And we are a people of signs and symbols, and we wear that symbol of that tear, of that brokenness, of an inner tear in an outward symbol. Much like drops of a stone in water that ripples greatly out. This moment, wherever you were when you were with or learned of the death of our beloved Joyce Piven, it was a moment of tearing open and cracking wide. So we begin this ritual with the tearing called Kriya, which Shira and Jeremy are wearing as the symbol of the inward tear that has happened of a broken heart on the outside. So I'm going to ask the two of you to stand. The blessing that we say is Baruch atah Adonai Dayan ha'emet. Blessed is the one who knows more truths than we understand. And we also say, as the Psalms say, Adonai karov lenishbarei lev, that the source of all, the presence of the divine, is close to those who are brokenhearted. Va'et dacheruach yoshia, and is there to support and hold all who are feeling cracked wide open and in need of love and support. Tear the ribbon. The book of Ecclesiastes in Jewish tradition teaches that for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which has been planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to lose and a time to seek, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. And this time, this funeral, is a time for all of that together. It is an ensemble of ways to be together and to feel however we are feeling, both in tears and in laughter and in memory and in right now. To acknowledge that now we will talk about Joyce Piven using the words of the past tense, talking about a remarkable person who was. The daughter of Blanche and Samuel Goldstein of blessed memory and the sister of Phyllis Hiller, born in Chicago, the beloved wife of Bern Piven. They were married August 22nd in 1954 in his synagogue in Scranton, Pennsylvania. the beloved sister-in-law of Miriam Piven Kotler, of Marilyn Piven, of so deep family relationships. Byrne and Joyce raised their family on Judson in Evanston, and so many years in the Noyes Cultural Arts Center. The beloved, beloved mother of Shira and Adam. The beloved, beloved mother of Jeremy. And grandmother of Lily and Pearl, and aunt and cousin and teacher. An actress still working until just a few years ago, a teacher and director and mentor, a founding member of the Playwrights Theater Club, where she met Byrne in 1953, founder, as everyone knows, of the Piven Theater Workshop, both a training ground, a master class, and a working theater. I want to share a few excerpts that have been written in a lot of public spaces that have summed up perhaps so many different ways that her teachers and students, colleagues, knew her. Joyce is described as a woman who profoundly affected so many lives, not only through training as actors, but helping them to learn more about themselves. She left fame and fortune behind, but did not leave the children or adults behind who she mentored, taught, transformed with her deep artistry and empathy. She brought everyone into her world where art for the deep healing, well, it can be, was always the event. It's where I learned that art really can save and transform a life. It did mine. Another former student shares, there is so much I can say about how she shaped how I think about art and theater, but more profoundly, she shaped my values as a human and how I want to strive to live those values. A student describes, Joyce saw me, truly saw me. She uncovered gifts in me I didn't even know I carried, as though she could look into my neshama, my soul, and pull forth what was waiting to be discovered. She had the rare ability to recognize the listeners, the braves, the ones who could open up themselves to the world's stories and pain and beauty. She didn't fill you with answers, but invited you to dwell in the unknown, the dark, mysterious spaces where creativity is born. And as a teacher, a student writes, I never would have discovered teaching or the art of teaching without Joyce Piven. What we experienced as curious learners with great teachers, warm-up and transformation into a series of seamless activities with a payoff, sounds simple in theory, but demanded a meticulous curation of balancing core skills of spontaneity and anticipation, of which Joyce was a master builder. She was passionate, committed, and nuanced. The art of play, the art of transformation, the art of ensemble. These were the values that Joyce lived her life not only building community and raising her children and her students, but seeking to enhance the creativity, the accessibility, and the deep emotional connection in the world. We will hear a lot of speakers and stories today. It is important to know that today will not be the only time we will talk about and remember Joyce Piven, because we will be sharing her stories and her memories, her ideas, her methodology, and what she meant to you for the rest of each of our lives as we hold on to her memories. So we open this afternoon first by hearing from her daughter Shira, who will share with us some words and remembrances of your mom.
Uh-oh, that was fast. I thought there were lots of other things happening before I was going to speak. Hi, everyone. So glad that so many of you, so glad that you're here, and Joyce would have loved to see all of you. It's really hard, so I'm going to start by just reading what it took me almost a week to write, just for a post. In case there was any doubt, Joyce was a voice. Okay, doesn't rhyme. In case there was any doubt, Joyce was a force of good in the world. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Okay,
You got this.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. He's now my director, which is appropriate. In case there was any doubt, Joyce was a force of good in the world. She was a force of art making in a world that does not inherently embrace the value of art. She was unapologetically a creature of and an advocate for the theater. She believed that we as people should never stop growing, and she lived by that. She is one of the strongest people I have ever met. She created a big, beautiful life, birthed an entire community with Byrne, seemingly out of thin air, inspired by her passion for a living, humanistic theater. She believed with her whole being the unassuming, almost un-American power and beauty of collaboration. She nurtured artists and human beings, and she did it without manipulation, without exploitation, and with elegance, patience, and a willingness to experiment. She forged her life in the theater through both force of will and trust in the beautiful spirit of the collective. She lives on not only in her children and grandchildren, but in generations of friends, students, and students' students. But a lot of you didn't really know her in what might be called her decline. She lost her short-term memory. Her beautiful spine curved forward, and even drinking a glass of water became a challenge. But she continued to insist on drinking water herself and getting tissues herself. She would get mad if you would do it all for her. And she continued to read and read and read. This was a slightly different Joyce. Maybe less commanding, definitely less active. Though she resisted it, she spent a lot of time in a wheelchair. This Joyce was ethereal and maybe a bit softer, though we never needed her to be. But this Joyce could also really listen. Her ability to have conversations about books and theater never left her. I know if I look at my kids, it's all bets are off. It was amazing because she could be seemingly like out of it. And then if you talk to her about a play or Shakespeare or Chekhov, or she just, her IQ just like went up. It was astounding. and her emotional intelligence was maybe better than ever. I swear to you, she would give me sage relationship advice. And when it came to the movie Jeremy and I were making, she almost couldn't think about anything else. Someone would say potato chip, and she would say, "What? What about the performance?" When it really started to dawn on me in the past couple of months, the irony that the last theatrical endeavor that she was part of was called The Performance. It's an Arthur Miller title, but it felt like she wrote that title. That was, you all know this. Her life, everything was focused on the performance. And yet the performance, the plays, the thing, was not performative for her. The performance was about getting at something real and human and truthful and connected. We love you so much, Mom.
Often at Jewish funerals, we read the 23rd Psalm, and there is one line in the middle of the 23rd Psalm that describes this room right now. The line in Hebrew says, Kosi rivaya. It says, my cup is overflowing. So many stories and so much richness through her entire life. Joyce's death also represents this remarkable transition in a generation, thinking about what we take from those on whose shoulders we are standing, those who we have the blessing of being next to and learning from and taking forward. So in the spirit of this overflowing cup, we will now hear from a variety of speakers who will share your reflections and your memories in all of the different ways that you knew Joyce. And we'll open with her sister-in-law, Miriam Piven Kotler, who will tell us more about Joyce in your world.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Shira. It was beautiful. Hello. Joyce Piven was my sister-in-law for 71 years. That is a long time. I was still in school, living at home in Scranton with my parents, when Bern brought Joyce to meet us. Believe it or not, she was so quiet and shy. She was all of, 22 or 23 years old. As Rabbi said, they were married August 22nd, 1954 at Temple, Israel, where Bern had been a teacher. Her parents were there. They celebrated. They were so happy. We all were. Last night I was thinking about Bern and Joyce dancing at Sharon Adams' wedding and how glorious they were with each other. Joyce didn't comment on others often, especially in those days. She was actually a woman of few words off stage. Few, but so on point and such impact. I was a typical young girl who hassled with my mother, and Joyce frequently reminded me that my mother was her guardian angel. Lesson number 1. Years later, she told me I reminded her of Nora in the doll's house. Well, that's a smashing point. I needed to reverse that immediately. And when my Bob died, she simply came down to my bedroom and squeezed the space between my thumb and my index finger. Just quietly stayed there with me. Neither of us talked. And she showed me how to breathe, which I need to do right now, and how to pack clothes, folding them when you're trying to fit everything in a suitcase. I often remember the paper she wrote when she went back to school, probably in a psychology class, exploring the personalities of 3 actor friends on and off stage. It was brilliant. Joyce introduced me to Alice Munro. We talked about the novels we shared. She gave my grandkids the complete works of Shakespeare on their B'nai Mitzvot. The narrative never stopped or even slowed her interest in stories, always. Joyce and Byrne, it was like one word. And what a life they made of their choosing. Joyce was so blessed. After her years of caring for them, her children, Jeremy and Shira, took such loving care, such devoted care of her, and her grandchildren too. Pearl and Lily visited, shared stories, showed their love for their grandmom. Joyce was a model of many things, and I loved her. She and I both told each other so at the last Thanksgiving. She wasn't talking all that much Thanksgiving, but she looked over at me, and we said to each other, "I love you." I give thanks for that. She lived and she died with grace, and everyone in this room will miss her profoundly. Rest in peace.
Next, I want to welcome Joyce's granddaughters, Lily and Pearl.
I tried to write something, but just like wasn't feeling like I could encapsulate what I wanted to say while I was trying to write something. So I'm just gonna try and speak from the heart, I guess. Nobody cared more and was more passionate than my Nana Joyce. The story that I always think of, I was in a high school drama class, and whenever I would ask for help on a monologue, it became her sole focus. It was like she had like blinders on, and it was like all she could think about. I remember one night I went over and she said, "I have the perfect monologue for you." And she helped me find a monologue. She went through, she had a really beautiful library of books, and we went through all of her, Shakespeare books and her Chekhov and all of it. And we couldn't find the monologue that she was thinking of, and weeks later, still she's talking about this monologue that I need to perform. I always kind of had the thought, I wish I could have maybe known her when she was fully sharpened with us. But I mean, nonetheless, like my mom said, she always had her core values and beliefs, and the things that she was passionate about never changed. Like nobody gave a better book recommendation, nobody had better advice, and she was always so happy. She would light up whenever we would walk into the room. She never lost her ability to emote and also to perform. I have a video of her only a month before her passing, and sometimes I'd go over there and we would just read Shakespeare sonnets back and forth. And I have a lovely video of her reading a Shakespeare sonnet, and she couldn't talk very fast, but it made it all the more dramatic and impactful. She really was inspiring up to the last day. I'm really going to miss her. Yeah.
It's funny being back in Chicago near Evanston. This was where I first fell in love with my grandmother, visiting her over the summers. And I got to know the Joyce Piven that I hear people talk about, graceful, a teacher, commanding. But I think I really got close to her a couple years ago when the performance was being filmed, and my mom, who would visit her, every other day, was away in Europe filming, and so I started visiting her multiple times a week. And it can sometimes take effort to get close to someone who's, older and cognitively in a bit of a different state. But gosh, that was the Joyce Piven that became one of my best friends. And she was softer. I love what my mom said. She was softer. She had an emotional intelligence about her, and she had this ability to listen. And she was my grandmother, but she really did become my friend. And I would go over to her apartment in La Brea, and I would talk about my dating life. And she would give me advice, and I would tell her that I stopped seeing someone, and she would say, "Oh, well, it wasn't Basharat." And I think it's really amazing that not only was she such a successful teacher and artist, and she touched people with her theater, but she also, in the end of her life, was able to reach out emotionally and socially to people like me, and I was able to become so close to her at the end of her life. And people like her best friend in Los Angeles, Stephanie, was a young woman, I think in her 30s, and they became best friends. Stephanie was there at her passing. They were best friends, and what an amazing thing to be an artist and dedicate your life to art, but also have such a rich emotional life and social life outside of art. I thought that I wanted to be a musician, and I went towards that path and eventually realized that it wasn't making me happy, and I pivoted, and now I'm going into academics, and never for a second was she anything but incredibly supportive and happy. And I just think it's beautiful that throughout her life, it seems like the emotional relationship she had with the people around her was always the most important thing. And I feel really lucky that I was able to get so close to a version of her that I will never forget and that I will carry with me my entire life. And I love her so much, and I'm going to miss her every day.
From Joyce's deep and loving and wonderful family, now we hear from Joyce's family here in Evanston, a legacy of so many of you who will share from the workshop and from as her students and as her friends. So I want to invite Jen Green to join us here and share with us some of your stories.
Whenever I've had to speak or write something important, I would always ask Joyce, hey, I'd really love to have your voice here. And could you write something? And she would, and I would use it, and it would be brilliant. And so I'm gonna steal things that she's said to me and say it to you today, because I think all of us know that voice, and that voice has told us so many truths that echo for all of us. I was blessed to know Joyce for 30 years, which is more than half of my life. I met her when I, like so many of us, young and at a crossroads, and thinking, I want to do something important and meaningful, and who can give me that path? Who can show me that way? And Joyce was the one that did it for me, and I can look around the room and see people that she also reached her hand out to. It's a beautiful, beautiful community. Her class was such a deep and rich place to be in the theater that she and Byrne created, and any of us who grew up there know it like the back of our hands. We navigated by that pole that is still there, the bane of our existence, but we would give it to that pole when we were told. And that pole rooted the sky above us, it rooted us into the earth of that foundation, and that is where she would sit. And so gently and beautifully and sometimes directly and now invite us to play. Such a simple, simple word, but sacred and dangerous and joyous, this process that she offered. All based in game? Game, who knew? Game, this play. And hearing Joyce's calls, the most fluent and present side coach you could ever imagine. Clear and open, you are enough. Look at the person next to you. The answer is in that other person. See them and be seen. And what speaks to us about Joyce's work is this sense of flow, one thing leading to the next. They just called it class planning, but it was a seismic, I know, and I gotta say, those of us who did class planning with Byrne and Joyce, well, that was 3 hours, right? But it is hard to make the invisible tacit, It is with great effort that the effortless can exist, right? Hold on to that old space as long as you can until you have to transform. And we are here celebrating Joyce's transformation, so beautifully articulated to me one night by Shira. One thing I want to say is this living work still lives, and those of us at the theater who are still teaching her work are surrounded by the next generation of bright minds, and we are thrilled to share these voices. We are thrilled to share her words with them. Joyce died on the first night of tech for our Young People's Company this year. And our closing show is tonight. Such a meaningful journey for us, doing what Joyce taught us to do, and a celebration to her legacy to struggle and marvel and make something new with young people. And one thing that we say on opening night, and we said it the night before this year, because we didn't quite know if we could make it through it. But we say what Joyce has always said on opening nights, and I'm going to say it to everyone in this room because it's true for all of us. We are all one company. We are all part of a chain that leads back to the first. Look around. You are the next generation of teachers and artists and innovators. You hold this work in your bodies and in your bones. Go forth. Tell your stories as though for the first time. Enjoy the night.
Thank you, Jen. We now welcome Ann Cusack to share your memories and your stories.
Here's what I was going to say. I'm not going to do it. What Shira has said, what her granddaughters have said, what her sister-in-law has said, what you have said, I can't say any better. You got to the heart and the soul of who she is. So I'm not even going to bother because I would be repeating it in such a lame way. It's just, they're so articulate and smart and intelligent and passionate. Can you see that they're not, the offshoots of Joyce? She's all over in them. It's just amazing. So I will start with a quote from Shakespeare. King Lear, Act 4, Scene 6. Thy life is a miracle. And I would add to us. So I would say, Joyce, thy life is a miracle to us. And anybody who has had you were never the same if her life touched yours, and everybody in this room knows that. And anybody who's been in a conversation with her, had a cup of coffee with her when she drank, or had a smoke with her before she quit, knows that you were seen and heard in a way that no one else ever had. And you were changed. It was throughout all of her work. I do not know who I would be if Joyce and Byrne had not opened their home and their lives and their work to me. If Shira and Jeremy had not been my friends. I can't even comprehend it. It's just so intense that way. So I mean, what do you even say about her? She's so profound. So, I don't know how we get over this loss, but the only things I can kind of think are, feel your feelings, be kind and gentle to yourself, know this too shall pass, acceptance will come with time. They all seem very cliche right now. But I think the way that we carry her with us is to live the principles she taught us. And the way that whatever was important and she was passionate about, that we live these beliefs and principles through us, we pass it on, as Jen said, to the next sort of generation. And read Shakespeare at least one sonnet a day. I just want to bring a little Irish paragraph to the, if you'll, okay. This is from, and you probably know it and have heard it before, but I find it incredibly comforting. It's a favorite of my family's. Death is nothing at all. I've only slipped into the next room. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar names, speak to me in the easy ways in which we always used, laugh as we always laughed together, play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort. Life means all that it's ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There's absolutely unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of your mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All this is well. Nothing is past. Nothing is lost. One brief moment, and it'll all be as it was before, only better, infinitely happier, and forever. We will be all one together. I love you. Thank you.
I think the Ashkenazi Jews can take something from the Irish in this moment, because that idea of being so close by and just in the next room and speaking names is how we all remember together. Next, we welcome Polly Noonan to share with us your words.
I grew up watching the work. I'm just ad-libbing for a minute, but one of the first and most formative stories I ever watched was The Tale of Arachne at Amazing Grace with Gita and maybe Annie, I think, or Joan, Shira, a group of the others. It was astonishing. Okay. I'm afraid today, but then I see Joyce in my mind carrying a folded piece of paper with her handwritten notes, and I feel courage. It's hard to know what's the most important thing to tell you. I loved Joyce. She loved me. She changed my life like she did everyone's. She was so funny. She was creative. She was fearless. I'm going to cling to my notes like a raft. She was the first true artist I knew. When I met her at 16, I was terrified. My story is one of slowly moving from Mrs. Piven to, why I can't say her name, to Joyce. When I started at the workshop, I didn't know much about theater. Joyce used to laugh when she told our class we were going to have scene study, that I innocently asked, what are scenes? She introduced me to so many important people in my life, some of my greatest collaborators. She built me, she built my confidence, she built my knowing, she built my world, and she saw me. She saw my vulnerability and she was unafraid. She did that for everyone, I think. It's astonishing, really. She saw us, she loved us, she taught us. She demanded excellence of us, and she changed us. How did she do this for so many? She taught me to take up space, to have courage, to step into the moment on stage. She taught me about language, how to use language, how to admit or defy or lament. And she taught me how to listen. She taught me how to use my voice. She always encouraged me to speak in the lower part of my register. She taught us specificity, how to handle an object, how to evoke the taste of a berry with the juice in your mouth. Like so many of us, I was a shy, vulnerable kid, and I found the seriousness of the work and the wildness of the games incredibly freeing. To be seen and recognized by Joyce was a revelation, and to join a professional company and have two major artists, Joyce and Byrne Piven, demand excellence of you was an absolute honor and a thrill like no other. Joyce's love for Byrne and Byrne's love for Joyce is an essential part of the story. Their love carried her forward, and their love drove her to continue her work, building their shared legacy. Joyce became my friend, but she had been my director and my teacher first, so I always liked to please her, the way a student would. Sometimes when I would visit her in Los Angeles after she was more housebound, I would plan my visits to see her before and after a haircut so that she could enjoy my haircut or at least have an opinion about it. And she always did like to tell me what she thought. When I was despondent after the first time that I had what felt like a big directing job and certain things went haywire, she told me that each project could be like going into battle, that on the battlefield is where you learn who was a deserter and who might win a medal for valor. She said you can't always predict who's who. And within the theater games, there were life lessons: to get with receptionist, try a new way to get in the door. The number of times I have used what I learned in this game in life, try a new way to get what you need, has become a practical way to get through life, to survive. Joyce was endlessly surprising. In the hospital, in the midst of a hard time, she started writing poems again. She wrote to and shared them. At one point, I was sitting with Jeremy and she quoted something that seemed like silliness, but when I did the research, she was referencing Voyages, a favorite poem of hers by Hart Crane. Joyce believed in the power of theater to change your life, and she created work that was dangerous and inspiring as well as healing. She has made her mark on the American theater through her students and through her work as a visionary director who took risks and didn't compromise. She would slice with a metaphorical knife to get at the heart of things. She worked past physical obstacles. Her direction of Ivanov was sublime. All the technical elements were gorgeous, and the acting was out of this world. When Joyce directed Orlando in LA, a friend of mine who saw the show was so excited by Joyce's direction that they decided to see a play a week for a year. Mothers and Daughters, which she co-directed with Shira, is one of the most memorable pieces to come out of the workshop, and her direction of Mud was sensational. She was always about the integrity of the work, the truth of the moment, to step into your fear, to go deeply. If you're trained in the work, you share that understanding. The final time I saw Joyce in person, she was feeling debilitated and low, but I got a bloody nose, and that made us laugh and laugh. I was tearing up and I thought my nose might run, so I said, "Look at this, I'm getting emotional." And she pointed her finger at my nose as I went to wipe it and just went, "Blood." Last Saturday, I got to read a Denise Levertov poem to Joyce's dying being, while Shira held the phone and Jeremy was also near. Thank you, Shira and Jeremy, for your generosity and grace. All of you, all of your extended family, she loved you so much and she was so proud of you. She built so many of us. It's difficult to fathom a world without her. I loved working with Joyce. There will never be enough time to say the right things, to describe the indescribable. Another thing I loved about the work at the workshop was those times spent in silence, times that we worked together without language. Because this grief, it's beyond language. Thank you, Joyce, for giving us the tools and courage to live with imperfection, for building a community of people who are connected through eye contact, through a glance and love, as well as words.
Next, we welcome Lilai Dimos to share some words.
Hi, everybody. So, my 9-year-old son, Alula, loves nori wrapped rice. And the person who, introduced me to nori was Joyce. Like, I didn't know what that was. I just was, and so every time you do it, and now he's like, doing avocado and getting fancy, I would just think, I always thought about Joyce. And so it's always on my mind. And they got a chance to meet when he was 6 weeks old. And there's a beautiful picture where, she's looking down at him and she's like, he's doing commedia. And she was right, because he's, we mess around. He just loves to perform, and he brings the comedy, brings a lot of drama, has a lot of feelings. And so she recognized something in him. Who knows where it'll go, but so over this week, I've been thinking about, they're just fragments of thoughts, memories, ideas. And it's almost like, when you watch a show and there's all these things and they're doing an investigation and you're pulling the white threads and you're connecting them. And it's this act of creation almost. That's what it feels like making something. So trying to understand these fragments, and most of it I don't understand, and that's okay. It's mysterious and it'll never be understood. But I think about Joyce had this combination of care and seeing you as a whole person, and it's beyond I see you. It's beyond feeling like she saw me. It's this acknowledgement of every part of you. And to me, as a young person, it was a real gift to have that acknowledgement of the total self. So back to the nori. So it encircles something in the middle. And whatever is in the middle can be any shape. Sometimes it's circular, sometimes it's square, sometimes it's a cone. And it really just made me think about Joyce, because you can be whatever you need to be, but she always encircles you in the way that you need to be encircled. And in my last show at Piven, my last year at Piven, I really wanted to find something, and I found this story called Exchange Value that was perfect for Vince Shavers and I. And I brought it to her, and it was just like, okay, yeah, and so the whole process of adapting this and making this and putting it up was, I just had this inner confidence, because it was just like, yeah, this is it. This has everything. And so when sorry, just thinking about. So I just wanted to close by saying there's a quote, because there are all these fragments and you don't know how they're going to come together. But I wrote down this quote like 15 years ago, and it's on my sticky note in my computer, on a digital sticky note. And it's the artist Chuck Close talking about another artist named James Turrell, who does these incredible light sculptures. And he says he's an orchestrator of experience, not a creator of cheap effects. And every artist knows how cheap an effect is and how revolutionary an experience. And that, to me, this experience of somehow being here at this moment, all that has happened, and from, coming to Piven when I was in 5th grade and seeing the performances in Amazing Grace, Joyce is, yes, you know what I mean? She's a part of it. She's made it. So I just want to also say to Sharon and Jeremy to give thanks for your generosity, because you've shared your parents with so many people, and it's always been open arms and always been embracing. So I just want to share, thank you for that. And the flow is really limitless from Joyce. It's limitless. It goes beyond time. And I think that's what we've heard today and will continue to hear. Thank you.
Next, we invite Lauren Katz to join us here and share in your words.
Thank you to everyone who spoke up till now, because that was very helpful for me. So this doesn't have to make sense, because that's what I meant. Everything they said, that's what I'm saying. If my parents could have been here, my father would have expressed his thoughts and feelings through his music. When Byrne died, my father sat at the piano and played My Buddy. The other night when I was with my parents, I asked, if you could play for Joyce, what would you play? And my dad said, oh, there are so many. And my mom just said right away, Sophisticated Lady. And my dad looked at her and said, yes, that's the one. They wrote this for me to share. Roughly 50 years ago, my wife Penny and I were blessed to have met and befriended Joyce and Byrne Piven, each of whom immensely enriched our lives and the lives of our children, in particular, our daughter, Lauren, who, quote, came up in the work, as Joyce would have described it. True. Beginning at age 8, and was mentored by both of them throughout her and their respective lives. It's difficult to find the right words to eulogize a deeply loved, departed friend whose connection with us endured more than half a century. To be sure, Joyce's intellect was stunning, as were her unique skills as a performer, director, teacher of theater arts, but she was a caring, loving friend to whom each of us could always turn when troubled. Joyce often described Penny as her best friend, and the thought of it never failed to make me a little envious of Penny. We both loved her so deeply and will miss her so greatly. There was a story that my father wanted to share today also, but he was on the fence. When he reminded me of it, I said, oh, this is so wonderful. This synthesizes so much, so I'm gonna tell you. There was a time when Joyce was in the hospital managing an infection, and it was one that caused hallucinations. My father and mother were with her often, and one day, Joyce had her bare foot resting on my father's lap. And she turned to him and said, You're a musician. Go ahead, play it. Which, without hesitation, he did. And when Joyce recovered, she told my father, she said, I remembered our time together in that fugue state. And she thanked him for joining her in that space. This is a little bit of what I'm adding, and it may make no sense because, as Leela said, fragments, pieces, feelings. So we shall see. Joyce was very serious about play. She invited us to disregard the conventional, be sensitive, spontaneous, disciplined, and to understand, as you said, that the answer is in the other person. It's too difficult for me to distill 51 years of lessons that reach far beyond the stage, lessons that live inside of me and guide me daily. Joyce taught us what community is through play. I mean, look around today. This is what the workshop knitted together. Joyce and Byrne invited us to the magical land of cubes and tunics. It was a sacred space for creative misfits to channel energy, experience a sense of belonging, and get down to the very serious business of play. Required discipline, commitment, a willingness to take risks, and most importantly, to trust. She lovingly tended to the health and well-being of all of us. She was teaching us how to be generous and open, to be a generous, open, playful scene partner. She was teaching us to be a generous, open, playful human. Her presence is eternal. She would say to me now as I struggle, she would say, don't tell, show. So.
And to close our group of students and friends and colleagues, we welcome Sarah Rule.
That was so beautiful. And the sight of all your faces is so beautiful. I met Joyce when I was 12. I was awestruck. I was actually in Shira's class, and Joyce was visiting. She wanted to teach us the art of transformation. Nothing less satisfied her. Using third-person narration in front of our very eyes, she turned herself into an ancient witch in a fairy tale. That was the first time I witnessed how narration could enact physical transformation in the theater, and I was gobsmacked. Years later, in the Young People's Company, she had us repeat lines from Shakespeare over and over, exploring and heightening. Full fathom 5, thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Last week, I read that poem over the phone to Joyce while she was in the hospital, Shira holding the phone up to her ear. And again, echoing everyone who's thanked Jeremy and Shira for sharing her with us during that time. I wanted to remind Joyce that she'd been transforming all her life, so this latest transformation was nothing to fear. Knowing that she was listening, even though she couldn't speak, I trusted that she heard every word. After all, Joyce taught the art of listening. She would say, "Nothing is more beautiful on stage than someone really listening, not pretending to listen, but really listening." She trained thousands of people how to listen with empathy and presence, and how to listen to the spaces between the words. Joyce taught me and countless others so much. When I was a shy child, she taught me how to play without self-consciousness. When I was a teenager, she taught me how language can transform space. When I was a young woman and had lost my father, she taught me how grief can transform into art. And as a grown artist, she taught me how to defy critics. I think she said, "Don't let the bastards get you down." How to persevere, and she modeled how to balance being a mother and an artist. She witnessed or instigated many of my big firsts. When I was 14, I took her scene study class. My acting partner, a wonderful person who's here today, and I had rehearsed our sweet little scene before presenting it. The stage directions called for a kiss, but we ignored it while rehearsing. Then when we did our scene for the class, he kissed me, and I must have jumped high. Joyce said to him in her husky voice, "Oh no, you have to plan those things in advance." It was, in fact, my first kiss, and Joyce had witnessed it. 20 years later, I saw Joyce for lunch with Polly Noonan the day I got engaged to my husband. "Ah," she said triumphantly, "you're going to marry a doctor." A doctor, she said. She always modeled and understood the importance of family alongside the difficult work of being an artist. When I started writing poetry and plays, she was an early champion. It was clear, abundantly clear to me, that I was no actor. That didn't matter to Joyce. She cultivated talent where she saw it: acting, writing, making music, or simply being a person. She commissioned my first professional play, and she directed it. We watched together in rehearsals when actors were brilliant and when they were unable to go on. One actress flung herself on the ground and groaned, "I'm in the tunnel." Joyce just looked at her and said, "Then get up." I visited Joyce in the hospital 10 years ago when she'd had a terrifying medical episode. She'd asked Polly to read Shakespeare aloud in the hospital room. As Polly read, Joyce would coach, "Stop, Polly. Read it again. That line should be a demonstration of amazement." She was an artist and a teacher equally in a hospital or a rehearsal room. The last time I saw her in person, I asked her how she was. She'd had some bad falls, and she said in her throaty, passionate, unmistakable cadence, "I'm not thriving, but I'm alive, and I'm going to stay here on this earth until they kick me out. I'm stubborn, I'm faithful, and I have good references." And she shook her fist at the sky. We talked of books and her childhood, which was very present to her. She spoke of the hard work her mother did on the south side of Chicago at a deli to support the family, and how her father taught her how to tell a good story, which she credits with getting her out of relative poverty. When it was time for me to leave, Joyce said she'd walk me to the door. I said, "No need to walk me. The doctor said no walking, no falling, right?" "I'll walk you to the door," she said firmly. "Let me show you what I can do. I've been practicing." She gestured to her walker like a queen. I got on one side of Joyce, and her aide got on the other side. She walked with surprising speed to the door, with us spotting her. At the door, I told her how much I loved her, how much she taught me, and she whispered, "That is the gift." I can't really imagine not having more conversations with Joyce, so I think I'll just go on having them. Somewhere, not out of reach, is her deep, wide listening, her love. If Joyce was your greatest champion, and I know a lot of people in this room feel that way, she still is, I promise.
We have invoked the words of Shakespeare several times, and it's time to read a sonnet. So we invite Jessica Thebus to share Sonnet 116, which is in your program, aloud with us.
Okay, Joyce. I'll do my best. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
And now for our final speaker, we invite Jeremy to come talk about your mom.
Well, this should be easy. First of all, thank you guys all for showing up. It's incredible. What a life. What a life. You know her as your mentor and your teacher and your friend, and she was also my mother. And she had this beautiful duality where she could be an artist and a gypsy, but also practical enough to be my mother. So she would say, you know, she would say, you got to clean your room. And then she would also say, you have to project. Full body whisper. The rabbi asked what her Hebrew name was and said, how religious is she? And I said, the theater is her religion. That sounds very pretentious, but it's true. My father was, it was his religion as well. And they had this incredible love affair, and they were perfect for each other, but they were very different. My father, when he gave me a direction, and Leela can probably remember this, we were in rehearsal, and he looked at me and he said, there's one actor in this room and you ain't it. And he was right. He was right. He was right. And this is before participation trophies. No, this is before people were worried about feelings. No, seriously. And he gave me tough love. And I made a breakthrough. And it was the best performance of my life because he cared. And he wanted to give it to me straight. It was heavy and it was beautiful. And my mother, when she gave a direction, it was fascinating because you'd perform and she'd go, oh my God, that was incredible, what you just did. And she would celebrate you and you'd go like, oh my God, It was incredible. I have no notes. And then she would say, who was she to you? Let me ask you that question. Can you locate yourself? Who? And then she would give you a note. And you didn't know you were getting a note. It was very soft and beautiful. And my father was, he said everything that came into his head. He was different than her. He would say, you know, if I was working on something, he would say, "Hey, anything in there for me?" And my mom would never do that. You know, she was different. And by the way, we would find something for my father, and he was absolutely genius. He was perfect, and he deserved it, and he was very brave to ask for what he wanted. My mother didn't do that. So I was running lines with my mom until she passed away. And one of the things that we were working on, I was doing a Boston accent, and you have to understand, she would enter into the character. She's just running lines with me, but she would play the character and do the accent of the character. It'd be like, you know, and it was perfection. And I started filming her, unbeknownst to her, and I gave it to the director, and he said, "Oh my God, who is this? She's incredible." And he said, could she play your mother in this film? And I said, "That is my mother." And I said, "Listen, you know, she's in a wheelchair." And he said, "I don't care." And, you know, people said, "She's too frail, don't let her do it." But you have to let people do what they want to do. People are going to say they're too frail, they can't do it, and they're going to try to stop you. But if she died doing it, you got to let her do it. I've done over 80 movies. She did that role, and they gave her a standing ovation. I've never seen that in my life. Ever. She put us on stage, and she's from a generation that wasn't overtly spiritual, but we would put our emphasis on the other person. We would be in mirror with them. We were totally present and getting out of our own way so that we could be our authentic selves. And so that authenticity is the highest vibration. And so she was incredibly spiritual, and that was our spirituality. And in the last decade, I became her like spiritual coach. And I would say, "Mom, before you go to sleep, I want you to think about all the things you're grateful for." And so that informs your sleep. And also, you got to forgive. You got to forgive everyone. And she goes, "Everyone?" And she goes, "Even Cousin Jerry?" I said, "Yes, even Cousin Jerry. You have to forgive Cousin Jerry." And she said, "I don't think I'm that evolved." She said that endings are important. And they are. And we were all in the hospital with her until her last breath. And she was teaching us until her last breath. She was very graceful and beautiful and perfect. The only time that she didn't support me was we were doing Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and it was the last performance, and we always wanted to outdo ourselves in the last performance. And we were already fully committed, doing Commedia dell'arte, where you're emotionally invested and you're literally tearing down the scenery. And we always tried to outdo ourselves, and my mom got up and left. and didn't watch my performance. I said, Mom, why did you leave? And she said, watching you perform was like watching someone trying to uncork an uncorked bottle. And she was right. You know, I was already there, and I was playing a character that was tripping on 5 sheets of high-power bladder acid with a buck knife in my hand, totally naked with war paint on. And I was trying to outdo that. When my father found out he had cancer, the first thing he said was, I want to teach my Monday acting class. That's who he was. That's who they are. When people left me, when I was alone, she was there. She stood by my side. She never left me. And as she was dying, someone that she had taught her whole life, and he and I started when we were 8 years old together, and we put the phone up to her ear, and he said all the things that he wanted to say to her, how grateful he was for teaching him about integrity of the work. And when she looked at him, she validated him. And I'll just say to you guys that was so beautiful, but we have to not wait until someone's on their deathbed to say these things. We can't do it. We have to do it now, and we have to do it all the time. I was named after Jerome Piven, Miriam's brother, who, when he died in the war, and he said to my father, I'm not afraid of dying, I just love living so much. And my mom, she was very laser sharp with me. She would just lay things on me so beautifully and so succinctly. And she said to me one time, okay, you're 50. That was 50. What are you going to do with the next 50 years? And so I challenge all of you guys to think about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. I love you guys. I'll never forget this. Thank you all for showing up. We will continue to have conversations with my mom. She loved all of you, and success is this. I love you guys.
We opened this ritual today with a piece from the book of Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes, which is a text in Judaism that questions what it all means. Why are we here? Does it actually mean anything to be alive if our little lives are just a drop in the enormous ocean that we all return to? And so it seems fitting to close this ritual with another piece of sacred text. These words, one of the last monologues of Uncle Vanya by Chekhov. Quoting perhaps the same concept. Why are we here, and does it matter if there is so much pain and difficulty and suffering in our lives and in the world, and we feel it so deeply? The monologue says, and I am not a Piven-trained actor at all, so I beg this company to forgive me. What can we do? We must live out our lives. And then we shall rest. We shall rest. We shall hear the angels. We shall see heaven shining like a jewel. We shall see evil and all our pain disappear in the great pity that shall enfold the world, and our life will be as peaceful and gentle and sweet as a caress. For as both of these texts teach us, life is not utterly meaningless. It is not empty. It is not vanities. but it is also not infinite. It is the impact and the imprint, the legacy that leaves the world changed because we were here and because we are here together. Our tradition recognizes that there is a difference between the body and the soul, the body being the vessel that we are blessed to live in and move in and create in and walk around in as long as it will hold us. But our soul, our neshama, which enters our body when we take our first breath and leaves when we exhale for the very last time, is separate. And so today, as we take care of Joyce's body, and in a few moments with the sacred task of burying her next to Bern, we first pray and sing that her soul is released, that it go and become part of the fabric of the universe from which it came, and that our hearts, wide and cracked open and broken, are broken open just for this reason, so that the essence of her can come and find its way inside. So I invite you to stand, to rise, either in body or spiritually, to just go up a little higher, as we pray for the release of her soul. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'malot Kirushim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakim Azhirim, Et Nishmat Joyce Adrian Piven, Shehalcha Le'olama, Began Eden Tehemenuchata, Anabal Harachamim, Yasti Rehebesetek Nafeche Le'olamim, Utzrol B'tzor HaChayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hinachalata, Ve'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkava, Ve'nomar, Amen. God, full of compassion, who dwells in the highest reaches of the universe, grant full rest under Shekhinah's wings amongst the holy and the pure, like a light glowing in the firmament, to the soul of Joyce Adrian Piven. Merciful One, shelter her under your wings forever and bind her soul among the living, that she may rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Just a few brief announcements before we leave for the cemetery. The interment will take place at Memorial Park Cemetery located in Skokie, just a short 10-minute drive from the chapel. For those of you joining us in procession, we will make sure that you receive an orange funeral sticker to be placed on the inside portion of your front windshield, as well as a magnetic flag for the top of your vehicle. For Shiva information in California, please email Eva, and her email address is listed in the service folder that you received today. And for those of you viewing online, that information is on the Chicago Jewish Funerals website. The memorial contributions have been asked to go to the Piven Theater Workshop and Jewish Voice for Peace. All that information, again, is on the folder or on our website. At this time, I'm going to ask the following family members to please step forward to help escort Joyce's casket from the chapel. Jeremy, Shira, Lily, Stephen, Pearl, and Sova. I'll ask everyone to please rise now.